Welcome, everybody, to this ChannelVision podcast right here on channelvisionmag.com. I'm managing editor Brady Hicks, and joining us today, we have the CEO and the founder of RingLogix, Albert Diaz. Albert, how you doing today? Excited to sit down with you.
Brady, what's up, buddy? Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah, yeah. And today, so that the catchy tagline, like to do those, right? How to get in the door and close the deal. And I think it's so appropriate, and I think people are really going to get some interest from this RingLogix. If we could start out, Albert, tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah, so RingLogix is a software company in the telecom space. What we do is we develop a white label VoIP platform for MSPs and channel partners. The solution is one that allows them to quote, activate, build, and support a suite of telecom solutions. And the difference between us and some of the other channel programs that are out there is with us, you own the customer, you control the pricing, it's branded to your name. You really own the entire solution. Whereas with other agent programs, you have some beef you got to run into, right? You don't control pricing as much, you don't own the customer, you can't provide the support, etc. So we focus on creating the solutions that partners need in order to grow faster, have better margins, have better equity, happier customers, etc.
Okay, and that sounds really kind of inclusive there. What are some of the most, in your opinion, what are some of the most effective prospecting techniques that MSPs can use to identify a high quality lead?
So I'll give you an answer that I think works for any business, right? Typically, what you want to do if you're looking for high quality leads, you really got to understand what are those leads, right? And to do that, you usually want to look at your existing customer base. So when you look at your existing customer base, you're going to notice that there's certain customers that you like more than others, right? Because they onboard quickly, because they bill more or less than other customers, because they buy certain products, because they work in certain industries, because they buy faster, whatever it is, right? Once you understand what are your favorite customers, those are the ones that I would call your ICP, right? That match an ICP, an ideal customer profile. So when I'm trying to really be effective in my prospecting, I don't want to just go after every doctor out there. I don't want to go after every lawyer or every attorney or every CPA, whatever, but rather I want to go after ones that I know specifically match my ICP. Once I've identified those accounts, right, then I'm realizing that I'm not selling to people, I'm selling to businesses, but I am selling through the people that work there. So the next step is to understand what roles are working in that company, right? So for example, you have an owner slash manager, you may have a sales manager, you may have a support manager, you may have a CFO or a buyer. These are the people inside the company that really influence the sales and make the decisions. So what I'm getting to is if you really want effective prospecting, right, you got to understand what's your ideal customer profile. You got to understand what are the roles that work within that customer. And then you need to understand what's the problem that you solve for the customer and how does it affect those roles differently? Because the reality is the same problem can affect 3, 4, 5 employees in the same company in different ways. Once you really get this and you get this well, now you're able to create messaging that resonates with those roles, and you're strategically going after a very specific base with very targeted messaging versus just trying to go after an entire industry or an entire vertical.
Okay, that's really interesting. So, what are some of the ways that an MSP can kind of differentiate themselves during the initial outreach, to grab the attention of the potential client?
So conversationally, I would say stop doing what everybody else is doing, right? And stop doing that catchy thing that you saw in some email. Stop saying this is the hot thing now. I mean, whatever's the hot thing now, that doesn't work anymore. And I think that's one of the biggest problems people have is that everyone's doing outreach the same way. Everyone thinks, okay, I'm going to blast out 1,000 emails. I'm going to blast out 1,000 calls. It just doesn't work, and the truth is, I haven't heard of you. I don't know you. I'm really busy. And when you're sending my email with that, catchy bait click, I'm ignoring it. When you're calling me and the second I answer, you say, I'm so and so with so and so, and I help you with this, or I help the guy across the street. I instantly don't want to pay attention to you. So my suggestion would be is if you want to differentiate yourself during the initial outreach, don't do what everybody else is doing, right? Instead, typically when you think outreach, you have a sequence and you have, a dozen to 15 touches. Instead of instantly trying to call people, just ask yourself, how can I add 5 or 6 touches that are soft, right? How can I show you a targeted display ad on LinkedIn or Meta or one of these places? How can I maybe go to LinkedIn and instead of sending you a connection request and trying to get you to talk to me, maybe I can go to LinkedIn and I can just like one of your comments or, post a comment on one of your posts. And essentially, what you're doing is you're starting with a softer outreach. You're trying to create a frequency. You're trying to put your logo in front of that person so that they just start identifying who you are. And then you're giving them something. And psychologically, when you give somebody something, they kind of feel like they need to give back. So if you're doing these things, if you're putting your logo in front of them a few times subtly through targeted display ads, and you're giving them and being nice to them by engaging them on social media without asking, by the time you send an email or by the time you make a phone call, they are that much more likely to know who you are and or to be willing to give you 30 seconds because of what you did for them. So that would be my answer. Stop doing what everybody else is doing and start adding some soft touches to that initial outreach.
Sure, and it kind of gets you away from that canned approach, which is always good. What are some common mistakes that MSPs should avoid when trying to secure a first meeting with a customer?
I think generically speaking, the most common thing I see just in salespeople in general is they stop selling, right? Like the second you get on the phone, you start selling, start selling. I mean, just have conversation. You know, me personally, my most successful sales are the ones where I just get on the phone and I start talking to people, right? Having the conversation, everybody puts their guard down. You really get to the nuts and bolts of what's important. Um, and the reality is, you know, the moment you start selling, people stop listening. And the better of a salesman you think you are, the more you're probably doing this. So I would say, you know, instead learn how to ask questions. That's the biggest thing, right? Like, don't walk in there and start talking about all your features. You know, instead walk in there and ask questions. Well, what do you do? What problems do you have today? What software do you integrate with? What are your goals, right? What are some inconveniences you had in the past? What are some things you'd like to achieve? And if you start asking questions, then you will learn how to ask questions, and then the biggest thing is you'll eventually start realizing the kind of questions you should ask, right? The questions that give you that answer that you know is going to trigger them to proceed in the conversation. But the biggest thing is stop selling. Stop selling and start asking questions.
Okay. So how important is it to kind of understand the prospects, maybe their specific pain points, you know? How does that impact a deal's closing?
Oh, totally. To me, it's the make it or break it, right? If you're even Steven against another company, another product, another person, and everything's the same, this could be the difference on whether you close or not. The reality is, I've seen a lot of salespeople get overly excited. I mean, I just hung up on a guy trying to pitch me something before we got on this call, and they all do the same thing, right? They immediately want to start telling you about all their features and benefits and all these things, and it's like, wait, stop. First off, how could you possibly know what's a feature or a benefit to me? You haven't asked me any questions. You haven't learned anything about me, right? The moment you call me, you started selling. And two, I mean, how dare you assume that's a problem that I have? Like, you're basically insulting me. You're telling me you're going to fix this problem for me. Well, what if I don't have that problem? So the reality is, you know, when you start listening, like I said before, then you start hearing what the customer's pain points are. And instead of saying, I got these 1,000 features, instead you pay attention, and the one or two things that triggers that person, the one or two things that are really important, those are the things you're going to talk about. So what happens is when they hang up with the other salesman who just told them about 1,000 features, they're going to say, "Oh, that's really cool, but I don't remember much because they had so much. Nothing stood out." And when they hang up with you, they're going to say, "Oh, wow, look, John, Mary, they're going to take care of this problem for us. I told them it was X, and they said they're going to do X. And yeah, the guy said he had got the other 1,000 features are there, but very specifically, they're going to realize that you understood their problem and that you tried to solve it." So to me, that's the benefit of understanding that is the customer is going to remember you, and they're going to feel like you get it.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, you're not hitting them over the head with it. You're kind of learning about what their problem is and telling them how you can fix it. That's a really good thing, in my opinion. What role, in your opinion, again, what role does kind of owning the customer relationship play in being able to close more deals and ultimately maintain long-term revenue?
Well, look, this is somewhat subjective, so I can talk to you from my experience on what I feel makes me, sell better or operate better. But the biggest difference I think is going to be environment, right? When you own the relationship, you own the environment. When someone else owns a relationship, they own the environment. That means they determine the timing, they determine the temperature, they determine the flavor, and you're just there for the ride. Now, maybe it's just me that I don't like to do that, right? But I rather own the environment so I can control the temperature, the flavor, and everything in between. So, you know, when you get to quote it yourself, price it yourself, support it yourself, you don't have to reach out to somebody else. All of those things really, help you close the deal because you can get to business faster. and it helps you maintain the revenue better because you're able to maintain better customer sentiment. You're able to support them better. You don't have to deal with other vendors at times. Um, so there's a holistic approach that just improves everything across the board. Now, in addition to that, owning the customer means that you're keeping some competitors out. Without getting into any industries, I mean, every industry has kind of gone through this. At some point in time, a competitor or a vendor, a vendor that you bring in may start offering a competing service, right? As an example, I'm in the telco space. I'll talk about a company like AT&T or Comcast, right? The big guys, I can beat them up. Nobody's going to care. So companies like Comcast, you say, all right, I'll refer their voice. No harm, no foul, right? They're the ISP. But the reality is, you do that, and now Comcast is offering a managed router, or they're offering managed Wi-Fi, they're offering managed security, they're offering email accounts. These are all things that the customer buys from the MSP. Now, the customer can sometimes forget the value, the benefit they get from the MSP, and all they see is, oh, so and so can offer it to me cheaper, right? Managed router, $99, or managed email, whatever. So by keeping these competitors out and not selling their solutions, you're reducing the risk of them competing with you in the future and offering something to your customer, which could introduce some churn.
Okay. What strategies can an MSP use to increase profit margins beyond just closing more deals?
So if you're looking to increase profit margins, you got to pay attention to the whole thing, right? From implementation to support after the fact of what it is you're selling. So, you know, true to what I said before, typically when you own the product, you will have a more margin than something that's resold in a channel type program, right? A channel type program or a typical, even some hardware, you'll sell something, you'll make maybe 15 points on it, 20 points, even if it's residual. But typically when you own something, you're making closer to 70 points on it, right? For example, you're selling labor, right? Labor that you own, or you're selling a product that you offer, or a service that you offer. So I would say pay attention to what you're selling. If you have the opportunity and you have the volume to be able to white label products or sell that as your own, then I do think that's going to help you in growing your margins and in attracting more customers and ultimately even increasing the value of your organization.
Okay. I'd like to talk about built-in automation tools and specifically, how do they, for example, like RingOS, how do they help MSPs to save time and prevent revenue leakage during the sales process?
Yeah, so I mean, like separate from sales, right? You need a good sales process, right, to have any chance of competing and growing today, right? Unless you're just totally lucky and the deals fall in your lap. But the same thing is true for just general growth and profitability. You need really good, effective processes. You need really good automation. You got to make sure that your workflows are tight, right? So from quoting a service to activating the service to building the service to supporting the service to processing payments for that service. A lot of times partner service providers in general, we can talk about MSPs, they work in very decoupled environments, right? You'll have a PSA in one place that's generating tickets and producing invoices, and you got some other RMM that's producing invoices, and you have a QuickBooks producing invoices, and then you have some third-party software bringing in the invoices, and you have third-party systems that are in different places that are disconnected from your billing. And the truth is, you end up with what we call swivel chair operations, right? Really old term, where you're constantly logging into systems, you're constantly doing everything manually. So when you have built-in automation, something that's seamlessly built from the ground up, it helps you reduce the amount of manual error that you have. It helps you reduce the amount of steps and activities that a person might forget, right? Or perform out of order or lose track of time on. So by automating, you are accelerating what you're doing, you're increasing the accuracy, you're reducing the human error, and these are all things that contribute to your operational efficiency, to your customer and employee sentiments, etc.
How can leveraging platforms such as RingOS help MSPs make more money, more control, more time throughout the sales cycle?
So that's the shameless plug, right? So a lot of what we just kind of talked about right now is what RingOS does for our partner community. RingOS was built out of the need for a seamless, all-in-one type solution in the telco space, right? Not only did we take a look at the industry and we said this reseller model is broken, right? The original agent model, it's time to shake it up with white label solutions. But at the same time, when we said what's out there, um, it was very discombobulated, right? You have service platforms from vendors, you have billing platforms from others, tax platforms from others, billing platform from others, back-end services from others. and you're constantly swiveling around, and it was just a total disaster. So an application like RingOS, what it does is that it combines all of those, minute apps into one big one. So we're talking about a single pane of glass where the quoting system, the billing system, the invoicing system, the payment processing system, the support system was all built from the ground up as one big application. So you don't have salespeople creating quotes for services that they're making up that don't exist in a billing platform, right? They can only quote what's actually in the billing platform. And then the quotes are not just generic quotes you make out of a spreadsheet. They're very service centric quotes that itemize the service, its details, its bullet points, its pricing, its moving parts. So you have a very relevant experience with very relevant data, and then the customer accepts that quote online. And when it's time to provision, you don't have an employee trying to provision services based off an interpretation of a quote. You have an employee clicking an activate button, and because everything is seamless, you click the activate button, and automatically your customer is activated. Your PBX, your users are provisioned if that's what you're selling, right? Your subscriptions are applied. Your customers put in build status. You 30 seconds later, you reload the screen and you have a customer that's active and build status ready for a truck roll if the truck roll is needed. So really leveraging the kind of platforms like we make are going to help you reduce your human error, get things done quicker, maintain good employee sentiment, maintain good customer sentiment, get your orders and build status. This is really, in my opinion, essential to have success today and to have any kind of scalability.
Well, really interesting stuff for sure, Albert. If people want more information, where can they go?
If you want to check us out, you can go to ringlogix.com. If you go to our website, we have lots of information there. And if you're kind of interested in, maybe just seeing around a little bit before reaching out, if you check out YouTube, you type in RingLogix, you can also see some of our videos and demos in there.
All right. Well, thanks so much for the time.
Cool. Thanks, Brady. Appreciate it.
Of course. And while you guys are online checking out RingLogix and all the great stuff that they have going on, checking out all their resources and all that stuff, don't forget to also visit channelvisionmag.com. On there, you can find archived versions of podcasts just like this, as well as CVTVs and webinars and white papers and just lots of great on-demand content right there on the website on channelvisionmag.com. And on behalf of our good friends at RingLogix, this has been a ChannelVision podcast. Take care.